Good afternoon. Thank you for joining the Ohio Urban Forestry Program's 2020 Conference Series, brought to you via the U.S. Forest Service's Adobe Connect platform. I'm Tyler Stevenson, Ohio's Urban Forestry Coordinator. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of our 6 regional urban foresters. Today you're joining us for our special afternoon safety session with Roy and Bill. We have it all ingrained in us that the health and safety of those working in trees and those that live, work, and play in the shade is our #1 responsibility. So thank you for taking time out of your busy afternoon to prioritize this important part of our daily lives. So now I'd like to turn it over to today's moderator, our Southeast Ohio Urban Forester, Ann Bonner. Take it away, Ann.
Thank you, Tyler. Welcome to our 4th day of ODNR's Urban Forestry Online Conference Series. We're grateful that you're taking the time to join us on this special afternoon session. Before we get started, there's just some quick housekeeping tips. If you're having trouble hearing, adjust the speaker icon on the top left of your screen. It looks like a megaphone. And if you're still having trouble, check your computer's volume and speaker icon in the bottom right of your toolbar. All the questions can be typed into the Q&A, and one of the urbans will help you out if you're having trouble hearing or if there's an echo. If you're experiencing feedback or a slow connection, you may call in using the numbers on the screen, and they will also be in that famous Q&A box. The Q&A box is available throughout the program. Type your questions and we will share them with the presenters at the end of the session. The raising your hand tab that's at the top of your menu will not work, unfortunately. If you're a certified arborist or a certified forester, CEUs are earned with the completion of each session. You don't need to do anything to get your CEUs except for hang in with us until the very end. On Wednesday, September 30th at 9 a.m., we will have an online coffee clatch/team chat to wrap up this first ever series that we've been hosting. It'll be your chance to chat with the ODNR urban foresters and other attendees from this conference series. Simply join by clicking on the link that is included at the survey email that Tyler's been sending out after every session. Next Wednesday, September 23rd, is the finale. Whoops, I messed up there. So next Wednesday will be the finale for our conference series. We're delighted to welcome Ms. Sarah Anderson with American Forests. This will be an important primer on the history and parallel between social inequities and tree canopy disparities and what we can do about it. We'll conclude that day with our very own Alan Seward. He'll be sharing the results of our community interviews, which have shed light on what makes Ohio's local tree care programs successful. To register for these last programs, simply refer to the email invitations and remember to share them with your fellow tree advocates and leaders. I would now like to introduce our first speaker of the day, Mr. Roy Montan, who's a senior regional safety specialist with Davey Tree Expert Company. Davey Tree works all around the world but is centered in Kent, Ohio, our own Ohio. Roy is passionate about safety in the tree care industry. He's inspired thousands of arborists and tree care professionals to make safety a top priority. For anyone who's been to the Ohio Biomechanics Research Week held in Kent, Roy leads daily safety briefs as well as morning stretches and safety exercises. He has creative ways of making safety a top priority. Roy has been in the arboricultural industry for over 30 years, and he holds many safety trainer, instructor, practitioner titles, including Certified Tree Safety Professional, and he's qualified as an OSHA instructor. On a personal note, Roy is member of the Dover, Ohio Shade Tree Committee. He's a Boy Scout troop leader and the father of 4 children. Welcome, Roy.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to let me speak to you a little bit about the safety and kind of share some passion around safety. So the idea is to try to give you some tools, give you some ideas on how you can create a culture of safety in your workplace, and share that information as you go about in the arborist industry. So again, welcome, and hopefully you enjoy. what I have put together for you today. When we're all done, there'll be an opportunity to ask some questions, and so hopefully we have some good interactive time together. And if I could get, how do I go to the next slide? There we go. Okay, never mind. I got her now. All right, so what we're going to do is the session objections is we're going to talk about the contributing factors that contribute to an unsafe culture. We're also going to talk about some common shortcomings of human nature that is present in an unsafe culture. And then we'll also give you some specific tools and some techniques to create a culture of safety. So that's kind of my objectives for today. We'll see how far we get and how we do. And again, we'll try to make this interactive with any questions you may have towards the end. So why safety? Do we deserve it? Do we deserve to be safe? At what point in your working career do you deserve to be safe? So do we deserve to be safe? Do our customers demand us to work safe or to be safe when we're on their properties or sharing our work with them? So do our customers demand it? And does our business, can it be successful or sustainable without safety? So those are some questions you can kind of ask yourself, and so why safety? Why spend an hour and a half here on a webcam talking to individuals about safety? Why safety? So I got a little exercise for you, and typically we would be in a classroom and we would have opportunities to maybe gather in groups, but for today, maybe grab a piece of paper and write down some answers to these questions, and then just kind of think to yourself, and I'll try to give you an example. But using the last year or so of a time frame as a reference, what I want you to do is think about an incident that has occurred within your organization or within your working group. That incident, what was the impact? What did it have on you? What was that impact it had on others? And what was the impact that it had on the overall operations? So that's some questions I want you to kind of answer for yourself about that incident. And then lastly, number 3 there is, what is being done differently since that incident or since that event occurred? What's been done differently? So those are some 3 things that you can write down or share in your mind. And maybe you're the only one from your working group participating today, but it'd be an opportunity for you to take this exercise back to your group and have that discussion. So my example that I have today is, let's say we had an employee that cut himself or herself with a chainsaw. That's an incident occurred. And so what would be the impact? Well, first of all, that employee would have to go to the hospital and spend some time in the hospital, have to maybe have some surgery on that part of the body that was injured, stitches most likely from a chainsaw. The other people on that crew or involved with that incident would have to respond to that emergency, so their work would be interrupted by responding to that emergency, making sure that that person got medical attention. Pretty much work would stop for the day. Possibly the job wouldn't be continued until further, maybe another day or down the road, have to be rescheduled, so the work would be stopped. That individual got injured, more than likely couldn't come back to work the next day to do the job, so we would have to work without that person. We'd have to replace the person with somebody and then train that person up to that ability. So those are a lot of impacts. And then, we can always talk about how much money it costs to have somebody go to the hospital and get stitches and then pay for them to be on workers' comp away from work. So there's a financial impact on an operation when somebody gets hurt or when we have an incident. The other thing is the client. Imagine your client, maybe a school or maybe a municipality, or maybe Mrs. Smith on her property, that's not something they or she wants to deal with. Somebody getting hurt and having the ambulance come to their property, or having that happen, and now everybody's asking all questions about the injured person. So, it's not very good business sense to have that happen. Also, how are they thinking as far as your ability to do the job that they hired you to do? If somebody gets hurt, possibly you weren't the best choice for hiring to do the work. So some of the things that could be done differently, we could train employees. We can be proactive in making sure that our employees are trained to operate a chainsaw properly, to avoid chainsaw cuts. We can make sure that we hire individuals and promote them and not have them do the work unless they're qualified, so qualifying employees to do the work. We can look at different methods of doing the job rather than using a chainsaw, possibly a handsaw or hand tools. So we can look at things differently that way. Maybe we have an opportunity to see what our emergency response was. So now we can look at, how effective was it when we had an emergency? Did everybody respond in a proper way, or did we have some miscomings or misfortunes around a way the emergency responded to? So just some different things that we can look at. As far as that particular incident, and that's the example I had, and possibly you have other examples that you would want to share with your group and talk about how an incident affects your organization and what we can do differently to prevent that and be proactive to prevent an incident. So kind of understanding the way the culture of safety works. On this slide here with all the rocks on one side of this teeter-totter, if we put all of our safety efforts on one side and we kind of throw out the fact that we're going to be productive and effective, it probably it's not going to be very sustainable. Or if we put all of our efforts in being productive and efficiently and not put much effort on the safety side, we're probably not going to be very sustainable that way either. So there has to be a balance, and one of the best ways I recognize that balance is the business model that they use with the three-legged stool. So I like to think of the three-legged stool as my business model, and of course we have to be productive. Productivity is what drives the business, what keeps us in business. We have to provide a quality service to our client. In the same token, at the same time, at equal length, we have to make sure that we provide a safe work environment and we provide a safe culture for our employees and for our customers. So I like to think of it more as a three-legged stool rather than trying to balance the safety against productivity and quality. I think we need to have a realization that those things have to be equal. We have to give that much effort into each one of those to be able to have a stable platform to do our business. Productivity and quality will never be maximized if we do not create a culture of safety. We know that. You read it in the news about businesses that have major incidents, and you'll see where those businesses cannot survive after the incident. So if we don't create a culture of safety, we can't maximize our productivity and the quality of the work we do. So why safety? Everyone goes home safe. Is that a definition of safety? That's the one I use. It's why I work safe. It's why I am safe. I have inside my hard hat, I have a picture frame. And in that picture frame is a colored photo of my family, my 4 children, my wife. And so when I go and put on my hard hat at the beginning of the day, it gives me a reminder that I need to work safe for my family. I need to make sure that I make it home at the end of the day so my kids can go on to college and complete their schooling. They have food on the table. my wife needs a partner to do things with and spend time with, and so that gives me a reminder that that's why I need to work safe, and that's at the end of the day I want to go home. So hopefully right now you have a picture in your mind of the people that would be most affected if you didn't make it home tonight from your job. You know, who would be the most impact on. It may be a family like I have. It may even be a pet. You know, maybe the family dog that needs you there to take them for a walk or feed them. It could be the goldfish. I know a gentleman that had a flock of chickens, and his concern was that if he didn't make it home at the end of the day, that the chickens wouldn't be taken care of like they should have. So there's a lot of things you could picture and possibly put in there. I know a young man that he folded up a dollar bill and stuck in there, and he reassured me that anytime that he puts his hard hat on, he remembers that the reason he wants to be safe is because he wants to make money. He had plans to do that money, and he didn't want anything to come between him and the money that he can make doing his job. So there's a lot of reasons we work safe, but it's a good reminder to have at the beginning of our day, and this is why I work safe. So cultures are created by leaders, and I would hope that that's why you're here. I would think that you more than likely are some type of leader in your organization, or you have plans of taking a leadership role in your organization. So I'd imagine that's why you're here, and creating a culture of safety is something that you want to put on your to-do list. You may have a culture of safety, and maybe there's some things you can learn today that will help you enhance that. Maybe you never gave it much thought, and so now this is an opportunity for you to sit back and think of ways you can get started in changing that culture. So leader is any individual who takes responsibility for their performance and attempts to positively influence the values and processes of an organization. So it's all about, you know, having a positive influence on folks. It's about behaviors, how people behave, and influencing those behaviors. But we have to do it towards values, and we have to align those values with our organization. So it's important that we understand where our organization is and where our organization needs to be, and that it starts with those values within an organization. So the role of a leader is to establish conditions under which all performers will choose to execute the mission, the vision, and the values of the organization. You may work alone, so you're the performer. If you're working alone, you may make choices on how you execute your mission. Do you have knowledge of the vision and the values of your organization? Are you working for the organization to share those values as a leader? If you have folks that you are leading, do you communicate to them those choices that you make so they can execute that mission for you and for that organization? I think a measurement of a leader is the behaviors and the results of those being led. Determine the leader's performance is those behaviors, and their performance is a measure of your leader, of the leader. So if you want to know how well you're doing, look at those that you're attempting to lead, and if they're not following where you want them to go, then you need to take out a mirror, right, and look in the mirror and say, am I doing everything I can to provide leadership for the folks that I want to influence? So sometimes you need to look in a mirror and say, am I doing everything I can do? Is there more that I can do? Who can I reach out to get some help with being a good leader? So there's some examples of leaders. We have the iconic boss that sits on a high pedestal and barks out orders to his folks. or you can be the leader that gets out in front of your folks and provides leadership by example. We also have, the tendency to think that we have the world on our shoulders, that we have to take ownership on everything, and we need to carry the load instead of asking for help and asking folks to help us be leaders. So we don't want to be that bogged down with everything that we're not effective as a leader. And we have to be just. So holding justice in our hands, making sure that we're fair in our choices and things we do. So you have to have a just culture, atmosphere of trust in which people are encouraged, even rewarded for providing essential safety-related information, but in which there are clear about where the line must be drawn between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. If you have an unsafe culture, you'll observe a lot of unacceptable behavior. If you get that culture to be more of a safe culture, you'll notice that there's more acceptable behaviors being done and being communicated around rather than those unaccepted behaviors. People aren't taking shortcuts to get the job done and being unsafe. So here's some critical elements you need for a culture of safety. It's very important that you have senior leadership commitment. Safety has to come from the top down. You have to get commitment from your senior leadership. If that commitment is not there, you're not going to have very successful attempts to change that culture. So you must start with that senior leadership and get a commitment from them. They need to communicate safety philosophy in everything they do. At the end of an email or at the beginning of a speech or a presentation, that senior leadership should be using things like safety and behavior and acceptable things that relate around their expectations that you must work safe and have a culture of safety. There has to be a safety leadership, and it has to have a structure to it. It's very difficult to just kind of point to somebody that's not doing anything and say, you are now in charge of safety. You have to have a structure of safety, somebody that's their role or their position to oversee safety and making sure that safety has a structure to it. Scheduling training opportunities and monitoring the incidents and communicating out to individuals around where they are as far as the safety culture in your organization. Operations ownership on the line. So we need to make sure that people doing the work, the people in charge of the folks doing the work are supportive and that they have safety resources. So they got to have some safety resources out available, something like a safety training manual, a company issued safety training manual, so the safety policies and procedures are in writing, so they can use that as a safety resource. The ISA has the ANSI standards available, and those are a good place to start for arboricultural work. So the Z133 is a good safety resource for folks getting into the industry and to follow along in our arborist industry. Have to make sure that we uphold to high standards and performance when it comes to safety, making sure that we have standards. We expect you to work safe. We expect you to perform safely, and if you don't, then there's going to be some consequences. It could be, we're no longer going to have you employed, or we may ask you to step down from the position of being a supervisor if you can't hold those high standards of performance that was set by the organization. So our employees, they must be motivated and they must be engaged. It's very hard to change a culture if you don't get buy-in from your employees. You can stand in front of a group of employees and talk about safety. You can explain to them how important it is, but until you get motivation and engagement from employees, you're not going to be able to change that culture of safety. So you got to find ways to motivate. One way is put up a bulletin board and ask folks to bring in those pictures of why they work safe. Make it relatable to reasons why we want to work safe. Put up the numbers each month of how much incidents cost the organization, and how we can benefit a business by reducing the cost that we're putting out to pay for incidents and property damage or injuries or vehicle incidents. Put those numbers up in front of the employees so they can see how they can change the outcomes and be better off with the organization if we reduce those incidents. And another way is, share communications from clients. If a client sends in a note or an email saying, "Hey, I was happy with the way that the crew was working on my property, and I felt safe working with that with the arborists today when they were out." So if there's a communication that comes in encouraging people to continue to work safe, it's good to share that with your folks, with your employees. Put it up on a bulletin board or put it out in front of them so they can see that. We see a lot more and more of comments and things coming in on social media, people giving us accolades and sharing photos of us working in a safe manner. So it's an interesting time to be safe. There's a lot of folks that encourage that and use that as a reference of a job well done is how safe somebody is on your property. Some other things is make sure you have some open communications. If you have a supervisor that doesn't communicate with the workforce, they have their door closed, their office door is closed, and the employees can't communicate well up to their supervisor, or it's limited on how they communicate. You need to open that up. You're never going to have a culture of safety unless you have open communications amongst everyone, all the way up to the top, all the way down to the newest employee that just walked through the door. You have to have that open communications to succeed with a culture of safety. Employee education and training. It has to be systematic. It used to be we did training when it rained. So we would wait for a rainy day, and then somebody would say, "Well, it'd be a good day to do some training." And so then we kind of run around trying to find opportunities to do training, and realize that it's not a very good day to go out and try to learn how to climb a tree or try to do something outside because of the rain. So that type of training doesn't get done on a rainy day. And we may share some videos that were a few years old, maybe outdated videos, because we didn't have time to get the updated versions of it. So employee training and education has to be systematic. If we have a new employee, what does that orientation look like? What are the things they need to know for that first day? What do they need to know that first week of work? What do they need to know after they've been here for a couple months? What do they need to know after they've been here for a few years and they're being promoted into the leadership? So what kind of employee education and training must be done to develop a culture of safety? If you're in a business, you think you know all the hazards, and you of course everybody knows the hazards of doing the work that you do, but we have to make sure that hazard identification and control is out front, and even the simplest hazard has to be identified. It amazes me how many times I go out and visit folks in the field and have a discussion around poison ivy, and they're not even sure how to identify it. They've heard of it, they've heard of what happens to you if you come in contact with it, but they don't know how to identify poison ivy. And so that's a hazard that needs to be identified, shared with everybody. So that's just an example of one simple hazard, but it could be something, as the tree itself. How hazardous is that tree? Is that a tree that we want to avoid being around, and we can do our work, change our work process because of the hazards we've identified in that tree. Hazard identification and control is ongoing, but it needs to start from the beginning and needs to be open to develop a good culture of safety. Being proactive around regulatory management. OSHA is very good at being regulatory. There's a lot of regulations that we need to know about OSHA, but OSHA is a very small part of the regulations that we must abide by. We have the manual uniform traffic control for Department of Transportation that we have to be regulated. We have the driving with the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. We have pesticide regulations. We have all kinds of community ordinances that we have to work around. So there's a lot of regulatory management that needs to be done to have a culture of safety, and it's best not to sit back and say, well, we'll deal with it when we have to. If we close our eyes and nobody sees us, then we won't have to deal with the regulatory side of it. But you need to be proactive. You need to know what the regulations are, how you're going to work within those regulations. So you need to be proactive, and that's why it's important that you have somebody committed to safety management within your organization. So the difference between commitment versus compliance. Are you committed to safety? Does your organization have a commitment to safety, or is your organization committed just to be compliant? Too many times we see a lot of companies that they say, well, we do this and this because we have to, but they don't really have a commitment to be safety. They're only doing it because somewhere they read or somebody told them that they had to do it to be compliant. So make sure you have a commitment to safety, being safe, identifying those hazards, mitigating those hazards, and having a control, putting processes in place to make sure that we have a commitment to being safe. Systematic approach, again, commitment to safety, quality, and productivity has to be systematic. You can't just kind of throw darts at it and hope that tomorrow we're going to have a commitment to safety. You have to have things in place, be systematic about it, put it down on a schedule, make an agenda of how you're going to show that commitment to safety, commitment to providing a quality product and being productive. Make sure that your training is documented. Have effective ways of documenting the training that you do. Keep that in the file. That way you can see who's been trained, who needs to have further training, and then you can always demonstrate that those employees have been trained for the work that you're going to ask them to do. So make sure you have an effective documented training program. Again, effective hazard ID, mitigation plan, interactive job briefings. We found time and time again that if there's an incident, most of the time that there is a ineffective job briefing. There was possibly a plan, but the plan wasn't communicated or briefed to everybody on the job site. So making sure that there's a interactive job briefing, so everybody knows what's going on that job site. Everybody knows what their role is and what their hazards that they're going to run into based on the work that they've been asked to do. So again, effective hazard ID and mitigation plan and interactive job briefing is a systematic approach to having a culture of safety. Make sure we have effective supervisory job observations. We find that the more that a supervisor is out on the job site observing the work being done, the behaviors improve. Things get noticed, things get repaired, things get replaced that need to be safe, repaired to have a safe environment or safe culture. So making sure that supervisor has an opportunity to do job observations, observe the work, provide feedback to the workers on what they're doing right, what they need to do to improve. And we kind of have a tendency to think that 75% of that should be towards the actual behaviors, and 25% of the equipment and things that we can visibly see. Sometimes when you try to be safe, you have a tendency to go out and just kind of pick on the things that are broken, the vehicle that needs repaired, the equipment that needs to be replaced. But if you're concentrating on all of those things, you're going to miss the behavior around that. So some of the behavior is why that person didn't take that piece of equipment out of service when they identified it being broken, but they continue to use it in an unsafe manner. So you want to spend 75% of your time looking at the behaviors of the workforce. Here's a systematic approach. It's stop, think, and act, and then review. We use the acronym of STAR. And so what that is we need to instill in our workforce that if they see something that it doesn't appear to be safe, or they need better explanation of it, to make sure that they stop work. They call an all-stop. They have an opportunity to discuss or think about what needs to be done. They have a course of action. And then after it's done, they go back and review and make sure that that course of action was appropriate for why they called an all-stop. So that STAR is important. It's a good systematic approach to developing a culture of safety. And when you have your employees calling an all-stop because they don't have good, clear expectations of what they were asked to do, you'll notice that your culture of safety will improve. Debriefings. Something we struggle with. We have a good job planning process and good briefing process, but we have a tendency at the end of the day to kind of throw all the paperwork on the table and everybody goes home. So we're encouraging our supervisors and our workforce to take a moment at the end of the day or before the next day is to stop and debrief on how things went the day before, what we did right, what we can improve on. Did we have a good plan for the work that we were assigned? Did we brief our crew members? Did everybody understand what was going on? So debriefing is something that we struggle with, but once we get our hands around that, I think we're going to actually see some improvements around our culture of safety, and hopefully that's something that you can use in your quest for a better improvement in your culture of safety. So making sure you have effective feedback. Positive feedback is pretty good. You want to make sure that you give positive feedback when you believe in it, when you see it. Make sure that you share that positive feedback, and at the same time, when you identify something that needs corrected, that you do it immediately and fairly. So making sure that you have effective feedback. So positive and corrective feedback effectively is going to go a long way in developing a systematic approach to a culture of safety. Tailgates and monthly safety meetings, making sure that those are systematic, making sure you put them on the schedule. Whether it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Monday morning, making sure that you schedule time to have safety meetings, provide tailgate information or training information weekly, making sure that information is being spread out to everybody and everybody is engaged in that meeting process. An opportunity to talk about past close calls and talk about how we can improve our culture of safety. So close calls and near misses. If you want to have a good culture of safety, encourage the sharing of close calls, and also make sure that we are sharing any near misses. That's where we had a plan, the work didn't go quite as planned, we didn't have an incident, we didn't cause damage, nobody got hurt, but it didn't quite go the way we planned it, and so that's either a close call or what we call a near miss. We almost hit that fence with the tree. It didn't break the fence. It didn't, but it almost hit it. It didn't go where we directed it to go. So let's talk about it. Let's come up with some action steps on how we can prevent that from happening again. So safety resources. You need some support around the safety program. Make sure you implement a good safety program and you review it, making sure you have some support around OSHA regulations and management of your OSHA regulations. There's a lot of resources out there you can reach out to. You can start with the OSHA.gov website. Gives you a lot of good regulatory information, but knowing those regulations is going to help you manage that more effectively. So making sure that reach out to workers' comp. So depending on what state you're in, making sure you reach out to workers' compensation, get some safety resources from them. Also make sure you have somebody that's assigned to manage any cases. So if you do have an incident, making sure somebody is managing that case, not just somebody that's filling out the paperwork, but it's actually going to manage it and keep an eye on it and make sure that that employee gets back to work and things don't go the way that's going to cause harm to your operation. Again, safety and regulatory training for your employees. Do your supervisors understand the regulations that they're working under? So making sure that you have systematic training for those supervisors and those that are managing. Industrial hygiene, especially if you're dealing with pesticides, make sure you have a hygienic workplace, so things are done properly, and you know what the regulations are around industrial hygiene. And then, periodically doing some auditing and looking for some recommendations on how you can improve your safety culture. So here's a simple statement. It says safety resources are a guide, and but it's up to you to catch the fish. So it's those safety resources are not going to guarantee you that you have a safety culture. It's only a guide, but it's up to you as that leader to go ahead and make sure that you put that safety culture out there and manage it properly. So some critical elements. Your safety culture will change. Management will manage the safety process. Employees will become empowered to look after each other and help advance the culture of safety. Shared values and respect, responsiveness, results will be accomplished. Safety will become an organizational value. Safety will no longer be a priority. So what do you mean by that, right? So why can't I say safety is a priority? I see that all the time. I see it on posters, and I see it in other workplaces, and safety is a priority, or priority number one, right? Well, that's something I disagree with, and I believe a lot of folks in the safety industry disagree with that. One of the reasons, here's something that Dr. Wayne Dyer, he's a teacher and author, he's now passed away, but one of the quotes that he has, it says, when you change the way you think about things, the things you think about change. And that's become kind of our mantra for looking at safety and how we can change things. And we don't want to have the same safety culture that we did years ago. We want to think about the things that we need to change, and then see that change are being made. So even the best make mistakes. It's what you learn after you know it all that counts. So safety needs to be a value in your culture. Values do not change. Priorities do change. All right, so I promised you that I would give you some tools. I promised you that I would give you some techniques to help you develop a culture of safety. I'm going to give you these tools. I'm not going to charge you a dime for them. You may have paid you may be being paid to sit here and listen to this webcam, or you're paying somebody to listen to it. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm not charging you for these tools. But there's several tools here that I want you to take away and put in your toolbox. And when you need them, you can pull them out, and there's no repayment to me for them. So I'm going to give them to you for free today. So I hope you enjoy them, and I hope you get a lot of good use out of them. So the first one we'll talk about here is that STAR. Again, it talks about stop. We want to pause before performing critical actions. We want to eliminate distractions and focus on our activities. Then we want to think. We want to understand what needs to be done before acting, and we need to perform the corrective actions, and then we need to review to verify the results. So when I first took this tool out of my toolbox and started to share it with some folks out in the field, I had a supervisor come up to me, and he finally got it. The light bulb went on top of his head, and he says, I finally have a clear understanding of what STAR means and where I can use it to be effective in my role as a leader. And he said, I'm going to take it one step further. And he had stopped at the local drugstore, and he bought a sheet of STAR stickers that you would see maybe in a school, and the teacher would put on your spelling test. So he got these little bright colored stickers, and he would hand them out, put them on work orders. He would put them on dashboards of vehicles, on trucks, and so then the message was each time one of his workers or himself would see one of these stars, they would remember that there's an opportunity to stop and pause before performing critical activities, think about, understand what needs to be done, and then act to perform corrective actions, and then review. So that was one technique that I thought was pretty effective. Every once in a while I'll come across maybe a report or something I did, and I'll find one of those stars stuck to the back of it or somewhere where I find it, and it kind of makes me chuckle a little bit to remember that they were using, or they still do, they use these as a reminder for the workforce to think about STAR. The next tool is a timeout or an all stop. And this is kind of a hard one to see. You're not physically going to be able to see an all stop. You may notice behaviors around it. You may hear it. You may hear somebody yell out all stop. You may hear somebody say they want to take a timeout and have a discussion. But it's not something that you can physically give someone, but it's more of an empowerment that you're going to give to your workforce, and understanding that everybody has a responsibility and the authority to stop work if they're uncertain or confused about the work that needs to be done. And so it's as simple as saying, hey, can we take a minute? Can we call an all stop, and let's have a discussion around what is expected, what's the situation, how are we going to perform this safely? So work shouldn't continue until all the workers and the supervisors have discussed and resolved the issue. It's kind of a hard one to establish in your culture, but once you do, it'll kind of grow, and you'll notice that even that new employee, the new person in that organization will feel that they have that responsibility and authority to call an all stop and question what's being done. So it's a good tool. It'll take you a long way towards that culture of safety, but it is a challenge to get established. But once you get established, I think you're going to find some good results from it. So a timeout or all stop. Very important, job briefings. I remember back in the day, we just kind of rolled up on a job and we all bailed out of the truck, and we kind of all went our separate ways and did what we wanted to do, and there really wasn't much structure to planning out the work, and there wasn't any structure on briefing everybody on what needed to be done. And then once in a while we would get a new employee onto the job, and they would end up having an incident, maybe not doing something correctly because they weren't involved in any type of job briefing. So the leadership wasn't there around job briefing. So workers and supervisors need to discuss the task, what the assignments are, what are some critical steps, what are the hazards, what are the obstacles, what equipment do we need, what are the error precursors, what are the things that can lead us to having errors, right? So do we identify those error precursors, things that could cause us to have an error? And then work does not begin until clear expectations around safety performance are established. one thing to remind everyone that there are no routine activities. Too many times I'll see where somebody wrote on the job briefing, oh, we're just doing routine work. Well, there's no such thing as routine work. There's got to be some type of assignment, some type of discussion around what the task is, what are the critical steps to do that work, and then have we identified the hazards. So job briefings are important. We do written job briefings, so each one of our crews is required to do a written job briefing. On a lot of our accounts, we are required to have a job briefing that is in writing. Also, it gives us an opportunity to share that job briefing with people that come onto the job after the briefing's been done, so they now can read what the job plan was and be briefed on it. It also gives us an opportunity to debrief. So at the end of the day or the next day, we can read through that job plan and give some feedback on how we can improve it. So also, when it comes to regulatory, it gives us an opportunity to show that we do job plans and we do brief the folks that are on that job site. So job briefings will go a long way. It's a good tool. It'll change the way you do things, but it'll change it in a positive way. Another tool is job or crew observations. And again, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but a leader needs to be engaged in the safety behavior at a job site. That leader, that supervisor, needs to be out observing the crew, observing the job that's being done. That gives that leader an opportunity to give feedback, to reinforce those safe behaviors that are occurring. Also, you have that opportunity to correct that at-risk behavior. So if something's being done, making sure that is being corrected immediately, and not have any opportunity for it to not be corrected. Opportunities for workers to approach a leader. So you're now in their office, right? They're in their space that they work every day, and it gives them an opportunity to approach you and talk to you about safety concerns that are there in front of them. So a lot of benefits of job observations, crew observations, being out there on the front line, asking questions, providing feedback, doing a good job. This is something we can do to improve. There's missed opportunities if we're not doing good job in crew observations as a leader or as a supervisor. So it's a tool that if you're not doing, I would strongly recommend that you look at your operation and see how you can incorporate crew and job observations into your culture. Lessons learned. We started lessons learned. We call them close calls. At first, we had a little bit of pushback. People don't want to share things that didn't quite go as planned. They would much rather not talk about it. But when we, identified that we could share those close calls or those lessons learned with a larger audience and get some feedback from more folks than just within your small working group. Also, we can learn from others' lessons learned. So we gradually are building a kind of a list of lessons learned that you can reach out to and say, yeah, this is similar to our situation. So we can use this for training. We can use this for a safety meeting discussion. But if we don't share lessons learned, basically we're just throwing things in those opportunities in the trash, and we are going to continue to repeat and repeat failures. So document them, share them. We have a system set up now where we can share them electronically. So it's as easy as pulling up your phone. There's an app that you open up, and you can put the information from your lessons learned into our electronic system. And then once you hit send, it goes into a system where anybody can retrieve that information. It is anonymous, so it doesn't require you to put any names or locations in there. So basically the information is general about a incident or a almost incident and how those corrective actions were put in place to prevent that from happening again. So, and it does enhance the future performance in similar situations. So If you had a close call on felling a tree and it almost hit the fence, you can enhance future performance when it comes to tree felling and identifying objects that may be struck by those trees. So it'll help. It goes a long way in your safety of culture, culture safety, but it takes some convincing for some folks to share their lessons learned. And what I find is we have a lot of discussions around maybe the back of the chipper on the tailgate of a pickup truck, but some people, once it gets past that immediate working group, they have a tendency not want to share their close calls. But with a little bit of convincing and then sharing other close calls with them, they have a tendency to open up and to share. So procedure, use, and adherence. I'd imagine most of your work groups, you have some type of policy, safety policy, some type of procedures in writing. It may be a couple pages stuck in a notebook somewhere, or it may be a manual that's 3 or 4 inches thick, but there's procedures. So what we want to do is make sure that our workforce understands the procedures, what the intent is, and what the purpose is of those procedures. Follow those procedures as they are written, being aware of potential impact if you don't follow those procedures. Stop if those procedures can't be performed as written, or if the procedure is a result in injury or damage. So, and then also report procedural problems and ensure that they are corrected. So, safety manuals are written by humans. They're intended to be used by humans and interpreted by humans, and we all know that humans make mistakes. So we want to make sure that if there is a procedure that's going to cause further problems, that we report that, and we have an opportunity to review that and make sure that we're not causing any more problems than we need to. So peer check, this is one of my favorites. I think that the more fresh eyes you have on a situation, the better off you're going to be. And there's no better set of eyes than your peers. So asking a coworker to observe your performance, having an agreement on what you're going to do, and have them watch you or observe your performance, or it could be inspect your gear. I want you to look at my safety gear, take a look at my hard hat, my climbing equipment that I'm using, my personal protective equipment, making sure that it's going to do the job I'm going to ask it to do. So asking them to have an extra set of eyes on that. So the peer would provide some feedback, say, hey, things look good. What went well today? What didn't go so well? And what can we do to in the future to make things better? So having a peer do that, I find that the peers are a little bit harder on each other than possibly a supervisor. They have a tendency to pick out the things that will actually be the most improvement for that performer. So again, using a peer check, it's a good tool. It's one of my favorite tools to use. It's probably the tool that has the most tarnish and wear and tear on that I have in my toolbox, because I use it a lot. I ask folks to do peer checks on each other quite a bit, especially when it comes to equipment and just the type of work that they're doing. So if you're not using a peer check, maybe try using that for a while and see if it gets you a little better outcomes. So task and worker suitability. One thing I find that before performing a task, we want to assess the capabilities of individuals. We need to have them demonstrate the requirements of the job. So asking somebody, hey, do you know how to run a chainsaw? I'll pay you extra money if you know how to run a chainsaw, and they nod their head yes, is not going to provide a safe culture. Basically, you're just having a good understanding that that person wants to make more money. But asking that person to demonstrate how they would hold a chainsaw, how they would start a chainsaw, if they can identify the safety features on that chainsaw, they know how to do proper maintenance on that chainsaw, is going to help you establish if that person is suitable for the task of operating a chainsaw. So you want to know what their knowledge is, what their skill level is, what type of experience they've had, and did they come to work with the right attitude to do that task. We all know that we have things that follow us around, and some days that attitude isn't quite where it needs to be. So it may be assigning that person to a different task, maybe something that's less safety sensitive. If they don't have the proper attitude, or even asking them to go home and come back another day and try to work another day. You're better off not having to allow that attitude to influence somebody's safety behavior. So make sure you document any training. So if somebody does successfully demonstrate that they can do a task, document that. Have some way of recording that. In that way that you know what additional training needs to be done for employees. You know where you stand as far as who you can assign what task, and then also it helps to determine the career path for that person. When they ask you, what do I need to do to move up in my position, you can have a documentation say, well, these are the things that you've accomplished. These are the things that we would like to see you accomplish. And so it gives them a career path when it comes to safety training and safety documentation of that training. So, ability to recognize and manage performance and risk factors. So not only describing the safety features on that chainsaw, but what are the risks of operating that chainsaw? What happens with kickback? What happens with those reactive forces to that chainsaw? And when is it appropriate to use the large saw up in a tree and to use a small saw, or even leave a saw on the ground and use a hand saw? Is some examples of recognizing and managing the performance around risk in the task that you may be assigning them to do. So again, task and work of suitability. If you get those in alignment and you manage those as a leader, you're going to see an increase in your culture of safety. Pretty important thing. It's also a lot of hurdles that you have to overcome when it comes to regulation on assigning an employee work that they're not trained to do. All right, so here's a little homework for you to do. What I'm going to ask you to do is, if you are serious about creating a culture of safety, I need you to make a list of things that you're going to start doing. And it could be some items or some of the tools I gave you or some of the techniques. So write down some things that you're going to start doing. It's going to help you towards creating a better culture of safety. And then I want you to make a list of things that you're going to stop doing. So maybe in the past, you stopped. You want to stop. Now you want to stop encouraging people to not ask questions and just do what I tell you to do. And so you're going to stop being that leader or boss that sits on the pedestal. You want to get out in front of your group and lead. So what are the things that you're going to stop doing to develop that culture of safety? And then there's probably a lot of good things that you've been doing and doing well. So make a list of those. These are the things that you've been doing. You're doing them well. You want to continue to do those because they're going to be beneficial to creating a culture of safety. So write those down as well. So when you're done, you'll have three columns. You can review those, hopefully, and give yourself a period of time. And I know it takes about 21 days to change a culture. It takes about 21 days to change a habit. It takes 21 days to learn a new skill. So if I give yourself about 21 days and you go back to this list and say, how am I doing? Did I start these items that I put down in writing that I was going to start? Have I stopped doing some things that were counterproductive to creating a culture of safety? And then am I continuing doing those things that I felt were important that I continue to do? So that's kind of my homework to you is to make a list, and then in 21 days from now, sit down and review that list. Don't be afraid to share it with your peers. Allow them to give you feedback in how you're doing. reach out to your subordinates or your supervisors to ask for guidance and resources. And then ask your cohorts, people that's on this meeting that you may know or you want to reach out to. Say, hey, let's do some brainstorming around creating a culture, and let's see if we can do this together. Let's create a team. So that's all I got as far as presentation. So I kind of want to open it up to questions, and then if there's any further discussion points, maybe that might help somebody out. So that gives us an opportunity to do that. So I'll turn it over to whoever's asking the questions.
Roy, thank you so much. That was a great presentation on an important topic. I'm Ann, and I'll be asking you the questions.
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me okay? Great. Before we get started on the questions, I do want to let everyone know that on the evaluation email that Tyler will send to you, there will be links to many of the resources that you mentioned in your talk. So with that, we'll start with the first question. And someone was curious where Davey purchased the photo holders that they put inside the hard hat.
So, of course, safety is a lot of stealing of ideas. We share. We like to call it sharing, but when it comes down to it, we kind of steal ideas from other people. But that idea actually comes from the U.S. military. If you know anybody that's been in the military, they have similar photo frames that they put inside their helmets and wear on their uniforms. So we kind of stole that from the military, but we did feel that rather than having the black frames, which the military was using, or the green frames, that we did the Davey green. So we did the green with the white lettering. I do know that Arborware at one time was making those and had those available, so you may want to reach out to Arborware to see if they continue to do those. They may be able to get you a supply of those if you need them. As far as who our supplier is, I could get that information. I don't have it in front of me, but I can get that information if somebody really wants to reach out to that same supplier.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's such a great idea to put those pictures in the hard hats. Our next question is from Kate Bradley. Where is this electronic report site that you mentioned?
So we have a claims management site. It's called Origami. It's tied into our corporate computer system, or our SAP system. And so Origami not only tracks our claims, but it also gives us an opportunity, or a platform, to put close calls and our close calls. And now we can actually do our job observations. So when a supervisor goes out and does a job or crew observation, that information is also put into the Origami system. It used to be there was a system called STARS that we used years ago, and then the last few years we went in and moved over to Origami. And Origami has been pretty receptive to what our needs were. So that's where it's at. Different levels of accessibility as far as supervisors and upper management, but anybody has the app, can put in a close call, and then supervisors and managers can recall the close calls and share with the group, with their group as needed.
That's great. Thank you. Our next question is, what training opportunities are available for crew leaders and managers in learning more about creating that culture of safety?
So we started, actually our insurance company used to come in, and they used to do an incident prevention program, and we used to bring our management in and spend a lot of time with incident prevention. And then we reached out to, it was called Human Performance. And so we used a program called Human Performance, and we used that as our safety training for managers. And then we merged with a system called Personal Excellence, and Personal Excellence then became Safety Excellence. So now we do safety leadership program with safety excellence. So we provide that. We've actually transitioned over to an online classroom model now because of the way things are, but we used to have 4 or 5 a year where we'd bring in new management, that we bring in management for refreshers. So that's what we use. But anywhere, if you were to look up human performance or safety leadership or performance leadership, performance excellence, I'm sorry, you would find some different training. I know that TCIA has some training around safety cultures, and then I know that there's some OSHA has some resources as well if you reach out to OSHA. And then here in Ohio, if you go to the Ohio Bureau of Workers' Comp, they have some good resources for safety managers as well. Hopefully that one of those help, I hope.
Yeah, well, those are great sources. So I'm assuming the private sources would be you'd pay money or subscriptions to, and probably the public sites are free. I'm wondering.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some type of fee to participate. Usually you get some resource manuals that you could utilize. I know I went through a program through the National Safety Council, and they had a safety program for supervisors, and we got a binder, and we also got some electronic information that we could share and use to hold a class for that. So again, you're going to pay a fee, but you typically get some good resources for that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the next question is kind of along the same lines. It's how often and what would be the best layout or plan for safety training? Short-term, long-term?
Well, safety should start from day one, so that new employee comes in. A lot of it has to do with expectations, kind of sharing the values of the organization around safety. We don't want somebody coming in to think that they don't have to be safe, that they don't have to work in a safe manner. So making sure that day one that those expectations are laid out, and then as their work performance increases and their responsibilities as far as crew leadership or supervisors, then they would have additional training as they go. Our human performance that we do, typically we do new managers. So as soon as they're assigned to a management position, or when they're getting ready to be assigned to a management position, they'll attend one of those safety leadership programs and get exposed to human performance. And then we do it as a refresher as well. So we may have a manager that's been in that position for years, and it's an opportunity for them to come in and not only share their experiences with the newer managers, but it also gives them a refresher on where they should be or what they need to do to continue that culture of safety. So it's ongoing.
Yeah, you make it a priority. I hear you.
A priority, we value it. Right, because priorities change.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that it's put it in as a value, and that is a company value is safety is one of our top 7 company values, and so it's very important that it is a value. Values don't change. Priorities will change.
I hear you. Thank you. Well, we're down to about 2 minutes, and we've got lots of questions. So if you're willing, we may save some of the questions for the very end after Bill's presentation. But in the meantime, we'll do what we can. Angela says that they're interested in suggestions for prepping crews that include trained folks and volunteers for biannual work days versus having dedicated tree care crews year-round.
Yeah, I like the idea of having a work day or a hands-on training course. I mean, you can sit down in front of a book and read about how to do something, but until you hand somebody a tool and then have them demonstrate the use of that tool. So I like that work day. You have to be careful with bringing volunteers in because their expectations of safety may be different than your workforce, but it's also an opportunity for you to share that with them. as far as regulations, your workforce is regulated on some things to be compliant where volunteers wouldn't be. So some things you got to be careful with that. But yeah, I'm all for getting people out and getting dirt and sawdust on their boots and having them demonstrate what they can do, and providing feedback.
Yeah, you did not teach us any safety exercises today, though. And that was the introduction.
A little difficult. I will give a little story, though. The other day I went to stretch in my office chair here, and I overdid my stretch a little bit, and I tipped my office chair back, and it fell over. Luckily, my wife was at home at the time, and she was able to respond to my emergency, which was actually more of a humiliation for me trying to get up out of my chair while it was on the floor. But that's my close call, so to speak, of today. But I do caution you about doing exercises while you're sitting in your office chair. So maybe if we had an opportunity to space out a little bit, we would do some more.
And we've all gotten a bit soft. Well, she was just doing a peer check on you.
There you go.
All right. So James Brown wants to tell everybody that Ohio Bureau of Workers' Compensation safety classes are free.
Right.
And I think with that, we're already a minute into our break. Let's save the rest of the questions for afterwards, if that's okay. Or Roy, if you're willing to answer some of the questions, during the break, just through writing, that's an option as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, everybody, for participating, and we'll see you around.
Yeah, great job, Roy. Great job.
Thank you.
Break time. We will start back here at 2:30 promptly. Do not close your window.